Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something intimate. Have you ever been lying next to your spouse, completely vulnerable, totally open, breathing in sync with the person you vowed to spend your life with, and yet something feels off? The room is dimly lit, your skin is warm against theirs, your heartbeat rises not just from touch, but from a strange presence you can't name. You brush it off. Maybe it's stress, maybe you're tired. But deep down something flickers, a shadow between the bodies, a silence that feels too loud, a chill in the warmest embrace. What if I told you that love, in its most sacred and sensual form, is not just a union of flesh and emotion, but a battlefield, not just between two people, but against forces neither of you can see, Jinn demons, energies that do not knock at the door before entering your most intimate space. These aren't just folktales whispered by elders. They are warnings disguised as superstition, until one day you feel it. This isn't about fear. This is about awareness, about reclaiming your sanctuary, because love isn't just sacred, it's sacred ground. And if you're not guarding it, something else might be feeding off it. So sit close, open your heart, and not just your ears, because we're about to go deep into a conversation that will change the way you understand love, desire, and the spiritual dimensions that linger where bodies touch and souls meet. Have you ever made love to someone you cherish deeply and suddenly, mid-embrace, felt as though your energy was being siphoned? Your body is physically present, your partner is right there, loving, familiar, warm, yet there's a peculiar heaviness in the air. You can't name it. You don't want to disrupt the moment by questioning it. But your intuition, your primal, protective self, knows something else has entered the room. It's not your lover. It's not you. And yet it's there, watching, lingering, feeding. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're tuned in. This moment between a husband and a wife, this sacred portal where love and desire meet, is not just a romantic cliché or poetic ideal. It is spiritual. It is energetic. And yes, it is vulnerable. Not just to each other's emotions or moods, but to forces outside of us, forces that don't respect the sanctity of love, forces that crave access to what is holy. See, intimacy is not just about the physical act. It's about openness, receptivity, a surrendering of defenses. You lower your walls, you open your body, you reveal the softest parts of your soul. And in that complete exposure, if you're not grounded, if you're not protected, it isn't just your partner who enters. That space becomes an open gate, and not everything that walks through it has love in its heart. Now I know, this may sound frightening, but fear is not the point of this conversation. The point is understanding. Why? Because so many couples come to me, spiritually drained, emotionally exhausted, disconnected, not because they stopped loving each other, but because something invisible has wedged itself in the middle of their intimacy. And they can't name it. They fight over dishes, over silence, over how one rolls out of bed, but beneath the arguments lies a spiritual invasion that neither has addressed. Let's break this down. In many ancient traditions, Islamic, Jewish, even early Christian mysticism, there are stories, teachings, whispers about entities that linger in liminal spaces, jinns, demons, spirits. They don't walk through the front door. They creep in through cracks, emotional wounds, unspoken resentment, lustful fantasies carried from the outside world into the marriage bed. And when a couple makes love without intention, without spiritual covering, those cracks become highways. But let's not just reduce this to fear-based folklore. Let's talk about energy. Because whether or not you believe in demons or jinn, you believe in vibes. You know when something feels off. You've felt it in a room. You've felt it when you've walked past someone on the street and your body tenses. You felt it during a hug that made your skin crawl. Energy doesn't lie. And sexual energy, it's the most potent form we have. It creates life, it heals trauma, but when misused or unguarded, it opens portals. A wife once told me, every time we're intimate, I wake up feeling more distant from him. I don't know why. It's like something is feeding on us. Her words stopped me, because intimacy, real intimacy, should draw you closer, not drain you. And if it's doing the opposite, something else is in the room. Let's talk about lust, not the healthy kind that draws lovers together, but the kind that is fed by pornography, by fantasizing about someone else while being with your spouse, by unresolved cravings carried from the past. When a husband makes love to his wife, but in his mind is seeing another woman, he is not alone in that room. He has brought that other energy into the sacred bed. The wife feels it, even if she can't explain it. Her body knows it, her heart recoils, her spirit closes, and slowly, night after night, touch after touch, the bond begins to decay. Or let's flip it away. Wife, full of resentment, she says yes out of duty, out of guilt, but not out of desire. Her body is there, but her spirit is far away. In that moment, the act becomes mechanical, unprotected, cold, and into that numb space, something unholy can enter. You think demons only show up in horror movies. They show up in empty beds, in forced moans, in hearts that are physically close but spiritually miles apart. When you are intimate with someone, you exchange not just fluids, you exchange vibrations, memories, fears, insecurities, spirits. And if either one of you is carrying unresolved darkness, it transfers. That is why ancient traditions speak of cleansing, prayer, intention, covering, because love without protection is like a house with no walls in a storm, and the storm doesn't ask for permission before entering. But here's the beauty, this sacred act, when done with love, with intention, with spiritual presence, becomes a fortress, it becomes healing, it becomes a prayer with skin. There is nothing more protective, more shielding than two people loving each other in truth. No demon wants to enter that. No jinn can feed off that. So what can we do? Begin by paying attention. After intimacy, how do you feel? Energized, connected, or strangely distant, depleted? These are signals. Don't ignore them. Your body is a radar for spiritual truth. Second, speak intention aloud. Before you come together, whisper a prayer, even if it's just, may our love be protected. That single sentence shifts the atmosphere. It tells whatever is lurking, this space is not yours. And third, be emotionally honest. Do not touch without truth. Do not kiss with resentment in your throat. Do not say yes when you mean no, because that false consent, when your heart says, not yet, but your lips say, go ahead, becomes an opening. A man once asked me, how do I know if a demon is interfering in my marriage? And I said, does it feel like something invisible is always sabotaging the good moments? Do you feel more alone after being close? Are you and your partner physically together but emotionally exiled from each other? Because the enemy of intimacy isn't just business or boredom, it's disconnection. And disconnection, when ignored, invites darker things to dwell among us. So here's your invitation, your awakening, your gentle but clear call to rise. Love is not just an emotion, it's a spiritual act, and sex, that's worship in motion. It's not just about pleasure, it's about presence. It's about merging two souls in such a way that the divine has no choice but to notice. And where the divine dwells, darkness flees. But only if you make space for the sacred. When we deny the spiritual weight of our intimacy, we leave our marriage bed exposed. But when we honor it, when we infuse it with love, honesty, prayer, and intention, then even the darkest energies have no choice but to stand at the edge, powerless, unwelcome, defeated. And isn't that what every couple deserves? You know, one of the most dangerous things we do in marriage is pretend we're not spiritual beings. We reduce connection to logistics. Who's doing the dishes? Who's picking up the kids? Who's in the mood tonight? But underneath all that is the soul. And when two people begin to live in a relationship that no longer nourishes the soul, they stop protecting the most sacred parts of each other. That's when the walls fall. That's when the spirits begin to wander. I've sat across from couples, well-dressed, successful, even loving on the surface. And what I see in their eyes is not anger, not boredom, but spiritual starvation. They're doing all the things they were told make a good marriage. And yet they're lonely because they're not just craving touch or attention. They're craving soul intimacy. That soft, magnetic pull where your partner sees the hidden you, holds it gently, and whispers, you're still safe with me. And when that hunger goes unmet, something else comes to feed on it. You might be wondering, why would spiritual entities, jinn or otherwise, even care about our love lives? And the answer is, because true love is light. And anything that feeds on fear, chaos, jealousy, or lust out of alignment hates the light. Have you noticed how easy it is for a couple to drift apart sexually, even when they still love each other? One stressful season, one long silence, one unresolved argument. And suddenly your bed is cold, not because you don't desire each other, but because you don't feel seen. That's when temptation creeps in. That's when the harmless flirting at work feels exciting. When scrolling through explicit images online becomes a release, not because you don't love your spouse, but because something spiritual within you is starving. And instead of facing each other, you let the darkness comfort you. But there's always a cost, because every time we invite something foreign into our mind, our bed, or our energy, we unknowingly give it permission to linger. When a man brings images of strangers into the sacred space between him and his wife, he invites comparison, dissatisfaction, shame. He doesn't leave the bed fulfilled. He leaves it confused, empty. And that's the spiritual transaction no one talks about. When you give your energy to shadows, the shadows don't just take it and go. They stay, they whisper, they influence. A woman once told me her husband hadn't touched her in months, yet he was constantly restless, irritable, distracted. She tried seduction. She tried communication. Nothing worked. Until one night, she stood silently in the doorway, watching him scroll through explicit videos, headphones on, disconnected, not just from her, but from himself. And in that moment, she said, I felt a darkness in the room, not from him, but around him. She was right, because what was once the sacred center of their marriage had become spiritually contaminated. And here's the irony. So many men think of lust as a purely biological force, a craving, a release. But they forget that energy has memory. What you consume consumes you. And when that energy attaches itself to your intimacy, your wife feels it. She might not say it. She might not even understand it. But her body will tighten. Her heart will close. Her soul will pull back. Because women are intuitive. Our bodies are designed to detect safety. And when the love no longer feels safe, we begin to grieve. But grief is quiet. It doesn't scream. It hides behind short answers, behind silent tears in the bathroom, behind the turning of the back when once she would have nestled into your chest. She's still there, but a part of her is already mourning the sacredness that used to be. You see, the spiritual dimension of intimacy isn't just a metaphor, it's real. Think about it. When a couple is fully in sync, deeply connected, and in love, something shifts in the room. The air changes. The moment becomes timeless. That's the sacred. That's God watching. That's love vibrating so high, darkness can't even find a doorway in. But when sex becomes a transaction, or worse, an escape, it loses that light. And darkness loves a void. It doesn't need an invitation when there's absence of love. It just slips in. Now let me ask you something deeply personal. When was the last time you prayed before being intimate? Not religiously, not out of guilt, but spiritually. When was the last time you paused and said, let this moment deepen our love. Let no outside force enter here. Let our hearts meet before our bodies do. That intention is not weak. It's the strongest form of protection you have. Because demons don't fear your muscles. They fear your unity. They fear your alignment. They fear your awareness. We need to stop separating the physical from the spiritual. In a real marriage, they are one. When your body opens, your spirit follows. And if your spirit is carrying pain, resentment, shame, or unhealed trauma, it enters too. That's why the aftermath of sex can be so revealing. Do you feel held or haunted, nourished or numb? A woman once said to me, I feel lonelier after sex than before, and that broke my heart, because she wasn't longing for more passion, she was longing for presence. The kind that says, I'm not just using your body, I'm honoring your soul. So what do we do with all this? First, we start talking, not about techniques or fantasies or routines, but about presence, about how you really feel when you make love, about what you might be carrying into that space, about what you're afraid to say but desperately want your partner to know. Second, we cleanse the space, emotionally, spiritually, physically. You don't have to burn sage or chant mantras unless that's your language, but do something that shifts the energy. Clean your room, light a candle. Play music that calms, not arouses. Speak to each other. Look into each other's eyes. Strip not just your clothes, but your pride, your anger, your fear. And third, we protect the sacred. Don't just guard your partner's heart. Guard your shared space. That means being mindful of what you watch, what you imagine, what you bring home in your energy after a hard day. Because love is not just about showing up. It's about showing up clean, whole, intentional. Marriage isn't perfect. It gets messy, tired, stressed. But when you treat your intimacy like sacred ground, you begin to notice the weeds before they take root. You begin to sense when something dark is circling, and you don't ignore it. You address it together as a team, as a spiritual union. Because at the end of the day, demons don't fear noise. They fear love, real connected, spiritually alive love. The kind that heals, the kind that binds, the kind that says, this space belongs to us and nothing uninvited is welcome here. There's a moment, often quiet and unspoken, that passes between a husband and wife after their bodies have met. It's that soft space where breathing slows and eyes might lock or not, where a hand lingers on a chest or perhaps pulls away. In that moment, you'll find your truth. Was your soul touched? Or was your body just used? We don't talk about this enough because it's easier to focus on physical chemistry than emotional intimacy. But it's not the mechanics that define sacred union, it's the presence. You can go through all the right moves, say all the right words, but if your heart is somewhere else, resentful, distracted, emotionally absent, your body might as well be an empty vessel. And it's in these emotionally hollow moments that dark forces quietly creep in, not with a scream, not with dramatic possession, but with subtle erosion, the kind that breaks down affection in inches, the kind that turns once cherished rituals into burdens. A kiss becomes routine, a caress becomes a negotiation, and love becomes a duty rather than a delight. You might be wondering, how do we reclaim what's been spiritually contaminated? How do we cleanse what once was holy, but now feels distant, defiled, or drained? The answer lies not in fear, but in reverence. You must learn to re-sanctify your intimacy, not just through prayer or ritual, but through truth, radical, uncomfortable, soul-level truth. Start with your confessions, not to God, not to a priest, but to each other. Tell your partner what you've been holding, that unspoken bitterness, that fantasy that left you ashamed, that moment you said yes with your body but screamed no in your mind. Bring it into the light, because anything left in the dark becomes a dwelling place for something that doesn't belong. Darkness loves secrecy, but love thrives in exposure. I've seen couples rebuild their intimacy not through sex workshops or tantra retreats, but through a single conversation that began with, I miss us. Because behind the silence, behind the spiritual static, is often just a wounded child longing to be held again by the one who once felt like home. You are not irreparably broken. Your marriage is not spiritually doomed. Even if you've made mistakes, even if the bed has been shared with energies that weren't welcome, there is always a path back, but it requires humility and patience, and above all, presence. Real spiritual intimacy isn't glamorous. It's not a candlelit fantasy or a steamy movie scene. It's the raw, beautiful act of saying, I see your soul, and I'm not turning away. It's holding each other when the shadows feel heavy, It's praying together not just for pleasure, but for protection. It's choosing every day to love not just with your hands, but with your spirit. And let me say this with all the tenderness I have. You are not weak for needing spiritual covering. You are not old-fashioned or paranoid for believing that your marriage bed is holy. You are not overly religious for cleansing your space or praying over your spouse. You are wise. You are aware. You are standing as a guardian over the most precious sanctuary you will ever build. You see, every time you choose love over lust, presence over performance, truth over secrecy, you shut the door on everything that feeds off your disconnection. Every time you touch each other with reverence rather than routine, you reclaim that space, and little by little the shadows fade. It's not about being perfect. You will have days where the desire isn't there. You will have moments of selfishness, of distraction, of emotional distance. That's okay. Love doesn't require perfection. It requires returning again and again to the intention. Let this be sacred. Let this be safe. Let this be real. I want you to remember something deeply empowering. Spiritual invasion doesn't happen in strongholds. It happens in cracks. And the cracks often appear when communication breaks, when forgiveness is withheld, when you stop looking into each other's eyes during lovemaking, when you start seeing your spouse as a body, not a being. So close those cracks, not through force, but through intimacy. Not just the sexual kind, but the spiritual kind. Hold hands during prayer. Wash each other's feet. Sit in silence and ask, what do you need from me emotionally that you haven't asked for? Because when spiritual intimacy is restored, physical intimacy becomes electric again, not because of technique, but because of truth. And finally, please don't forget the power of sacred silence. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do in your marriage is simply sit beside your partner in peace, no demands, no expectations, just being, just loving, just breathing in the same rhythm. That stillness becomes your protection. That quiet, shared presence is where Jinn cannot dwell. So, if you've felt it, if you've sensed the weight, the shift, the unspoken presence during or after intimacy, don't deny it. Don't shame yourself for noticing. That is your intuition. That is your spiritual self whispering, there's more here than meets the eye. Honor that voice. Tend to it, because your love deserves to thrive in light, not limp in darkness. Because your intimacy was never meant to be invaded. Because your bed is not just where you sleep or make love. It is where the spirit of your union is either nourished or neglected. And today you get to choose. I want to thank you for staying with me through this conversation. I know it wasn't easy, but it was necessary, because too many couples are suffering in silence, confusing spiritual interference with personal failure. And that ends now. If this resonated with you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments. Maybe someone else will find courage in your words. Like the video if it opened your eyes. Subscribe if you want more of these sacred conversations around love, healing, and intimacy. Remember, every time you choose truth, you protect your union. Every time you choose presence, you reclaim the sacred. And every time you love with intention, you close the door on anything that doesn't belong in your home. Here's to love that is holy, guarded, and gloriously alive. There's something that no one really prepares you for when you're building a marriage. Not just how intimacy shapes the bond between husband and wife, but how it reverberates through the entire home. Because the energy you exchange in the bedroom doesn't stay there. It seeps into the walls. It lives in the silence. It becomes the emotional oxygen your children breathe. I say this with full compassion. Your children don't have to witness your arguments or see your moments of disconnection to feel them. Children are wired for emotional frequency. They sense when something in the home is cold, unspoken, or off. They become the emotional barometers for a space that has been spiritually disturbed. When intimacy between husband and wife is invaded by resentment, spiritual darkness, unfaithfulness, or disconnection, the ripple doesn't stop at the edge of the bed. It continues into the next morning, into the way coffee is poured, into the way footsteps echo on the floors, into how mom answers, "I'm fine," and how dad retreats into his phone. That energy, though subtle, becomes the emotional ecosystem your children grow in. And if they don't know how to name it, they'll start to believe it's normal. Now, why does this matter so much in a conversation about Jinn, spiritual energy, and sacred intimacy? Because when something dark latches onto your marriage, it does not isolate itself to your sexual connection. It invades through that door, yes, but it roams, it whispers, it poisons slowly. And often, it begins to reflect itself through the very ones who were never supposed to carry it, your children. Have you ever seen a child suddenly develop anxiety out of nowhere? Or nightmares that don't make sense? Or begin to withdraw emotionally even though nothing in their day today has changed? We often look to screens, to school, to sugar. But rarely do we ask, what energy are we creating in this home? What spiritual atmosphere are we allowing to grow here? Because the bed is not just where we sleep, it's the altar of the home. And when that altar is defiled, everything around it loses order. There was a woman I once counseled who said, "I think something followed us home." She had no words to explain it logically, but she noticed it after one night. A night when she and her husband were physically together but emotionally disconnected. He had been distant, carrying lustful thoughts she could feel but not prove. She felt cold in his arms. She described it like being touched through a veil. The next morning, her child woke up screaming from a nightmare. That week, the child's behavior changed. She couldn't explain it, but something in her mother's heart knew. It started in their bedroom. That's how sensitive children are to the emotional undercurrents we refuse to confront. So how do we protect not just our marriage bed, but the spiritual climate of our home? We begin by acknowledging the unseen. It's not about paranoia, it's about presence. You don't have to believe in Jinn to believe in energy. You've felt it when someone walks into a room and changes the atmosphere with a single glance. You've seen it in houses that feel peaceful before a word is spoken. That's energy. That's spiritual climate. And in a marriage, it begins with you. You protect your home not just by locking the doors, but by guarding the energies you bring into it. By deciding that your intimacy will not be a battleground for spiritual debris, that your sexual connection will not be a portal for unresolved pain, that your words will not carry venom, and your silence will not carry poison. And this is where love matures. When a husband and wife choose not just to be lovers, but to be guardians, to look each other in the eye and say, let's cleanse our space. That might be a physical ritual, a prayer, a blessing, lighting a candle, or it might be something deeper, a conversation, an apology, a moment of stillness where you both choose to release what doesn't belong. You become the watchman of your home together, and don't think you have to be perfect to do this. This isn't about purity culture or shame-based control. It's about waking up. It's about saying, oh, if we've let something in, let's usher it out. Not with fear, but with authority. Because when love is intentional, when intimacy is spiritual, when the home is rooted in peace, there is no room for darkness to dwell. Not because life is perfect, but because love becomes a shield. I want to speak directly to the men for a moment. You are not just protectors in the physical sense. You are also spiritual protectors. The way you treat your wife's body is a reflection of how you protect her soul. Your leadership is not just in what you provide, but in the atmosphere you create. Are you inviting peace into your home or carrying energies from outside? Pornography, emotional affairs, fantasies that make her spirit recoil even as her body tries to remain close. And to the women, your intuition is a gift. If you feel something is spiritually wrong, speak it. Don't dismiss your knowing. Don't shrink it down to, maybe I'm just tired. You are the heart of the home. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a signal, a gift to be honored, not ignored. There's an old saying, when the marriage is right, the home is right. And when the home is right, the world feels safer. We are not just fighting for good sex or harmonious parenting. We are reclaiming the spiritual integrity of our most intimate spaces. Because when you and your spouse are connected spiritually, your home becomes a sanctuary. Your children thrive in that sanctuary. They feel safe even when life is hard. They sleep deeper. They smile more. Not because the world is easy, but because their home is spiritually ordered. And in a world full of chaos, that sacred order is a revolution. So I invite you tonight, not just to reconnect physically, but to check your spiritual temperature, to cleanse what's lingering, to speak what's been buried, to invite peace back into the places where shadows once grew. Your home deserves peace. Your children deserve protection. And your marriage deserves to be the spiritual fortress it was always meant to be. There is a moment, quiet and slow, when a husband looks at his wife, not as the woman he married, not as the caretaker of his children, not even as his lover, but as his divine counterpart, the one his soul was knit to, not out of convenience, but calling, not just a partner in life, but in spirit. And when she looks back with the same fire, the same peace, the same recognition, the room shifts. The walls remember who they were built to protect. The silence becomes warm again. The bed becomes holy again. That is reclamation. We often think reclaiming something means taking it back by force. But when it comes to intimacy, the battle isn't fought with fists. It's fought with presence, with choosing to show up again in the space where you once disappeared. It's looking at your partner and saying, why may have let things slip? We may have allowed other energies, other wounds, even other people to step into this sacred space. But tonight we close the doors. Tonight we come back. Reclaiming your intimacy isn't about igniting the flame. It's about clearing away the fog so you can see the flame never left. It was just hidden beneath layers, layers of stress, layers of secrets, layers of spiritual static. And once the fog lifts, you realize your love still breathes. So how do we protect that flame now? Not just once, but daily. We do it by choosing awareness over autopilot, by refusing to make love out of obligation, by refusing to touch our partner when our hearts are full of bitterness, by refusing to welcome a third energy, whether that be lust, pride, or distraction, into our bedroom, because the bed is not just a place of rest, it's the altar of union, and what enters there stays with you. That's why before you reach for her body, reach for her eyes. Look into them long enough to remember who she is, who she's been for you, how she's stayed, how she's held pain you never saw, how she's made room for your growth even when it cost her comfort. Before you undress her, strip yourself of ego, of entitlement, of anything that makes you forget she's sacred ground. And for her, Before you open your body, ask yourself, is your spirit open too? Or are you giving because you feel you must, because you fear his rejection if you don't, because you're too exhausted to say no? That's where invasion begins, not with some demonic scream in the night, but with the quiet death of consent, the slow erosion of choice, the intimate betrayal of pretending to enjoy what your soul reasons. It doesn't have to be this way. You have the power to stop mid-touch and say, let's start over. Let's invite love back into this. You have the right to pause and say, I need your heart before your hands. That kind of honesty doesn't kill desire. It purifies it. Because when your bodies are aligned with your spirits, the act becomes more than pleasure. It becomes healing, a holy exchange, a mutual blessing. And in that space, darkness has no authority. You see, jinn and demons don't seek you because of how strong your love is. They seek you because of how sacred it is. And the more sacred something is, the more it becomes a target. But sacred doesn't mean fragile. It means protected. So protect it. Turn your marriage bed into a no-fly zone for the enemy. Speak light into the corners of the room. Reclaim the shadows where secrets used to sleep. Walk the perimeter of your home with your partner, hand in hand, and say aloud, this house is not a playground for chaos. This bed is not a battlefield for demons. This union is protected. This intimacy is sealed, because if you don't claim it, something else will. And when it comes to the sacred, neutrality is an illusion. You are either preserving it or allowing it to be polluted. I know this conversation may have brought up a lot. You might be feeling guilt, maybe fear, maybe grief for what's been lost. But let me tell you this clearly, tenderly, truthfully, it's not too late. You can rebuild, you can re-bless, you can reignite, because love that is truly sacred doesn't die. It simply waits. It waits for your return. Return to each other. Return to intention. Return to the belief that your love is worthy of being protected. Not just physically, but spiritually. And let this be the beginning of that return. Not with pressure, but with peace. Not with shame, but with sacred fire. Talk tonight, not about the dishes or the deadlines, but about what your soul needs, what your heart fears, what your body remembers. Speak not just to solve, but to connect, to reweave the strands that time or trauma unraveled. Let your marriage bed become a sanctuary again. Let your love become a force field again. Because when a man and woman unite in spirit, mind, and body in the presence of divine awareness, even the darkest force must bow. Even the deepest wound begins to close. And that is when intimacy becomes what it was always meant to be. Not just pleasurable, but powerful. Not just sacred, but unstoppable. So tonight, light the candle, cleanse the room, look into their eyes, and say the words that drive out every shadow. We are here. We are together. And this love is protected. Thank you for walking with me through this intimate and holy conversation. If this opened something in you, your thoughts, your awareness, your heart, share it in the comments. Someone else might need your truth. If you want more of these sacred dialogues, like the video, subscribe to this space and protect your love with the same fierce devotion you protect your peace. Because your intimacy matters, your spiritual energy matters, and your love is worth the light.